Hi and welcome to this walkthrough of my Trick or Treat plushie. I designed this Halloween themed plush toy in xShape. You'll find this app under the 3D Sculptor role on the 3D Experience platform. In this video I want to take you through the steps I took to design, model and render my product. This will include a dip into xShape, SOLIDWORKS and SOLIDWORKS Visualize. Starting in xShape, you can see that the entire plushie was modelled within the app. The main apple shape with the stick was created with just one subdivision shape. When I go into the surface and edit, you can see that I started with the quad ball, chosen for its more structured spherical nature. I knew I could use this to create an apple shape quicker, and it would be much easier to extrude the stick element of the apple too. You can see from the top and bottom views why this shape was the right choice for me, especially when looking at the bottom extrusions of the apple. I kept my design quite symmetrical, but I could have made it so much more irregular. I created a fruit crate tutorial a while back, which if you watched, you would see my apple design. Bringing it up here, you'll see I created a much more realistic version within xShape, but for my plush toy design, I thought it was best to be more regular. When designing in xShape, you really need to start your model with the best primitive shape. This means that you need to have some sort of preconceived idea and choose the shape based on this. For example, I couldn't have started my design with the torus primitive shape. This choice comes with some practice and knowledge of the primitive shapes, so play around with these before starting your design. The next step was to create the toffee element of the plush. I did this by copying the apple part and scaling it up by 10%. Editing the surface to see it more clearly, I deleted the faces of the stick to bring the shape into the apple. I wanted to make the toffee look like it had been poured onto the apple and was dripping down the sides. This meant I needed to insert some more loops onto my shape to make it easier to manipulate and add more complex drip details. You can see I left an opening at the top here. This was so that you could still see a glimpse of the apple colour while also thinking about the design as a plush toy. I want the apple to look like the toffee part has been stitched on as a separate element or piece of fabric. Closing that up, you can see underneath each of my sub-D surfaces there is a knit surface feature. This is an important feature of the component as this creates solid bodies. If this doesn't appear, there could be an issue with your model's mesh, and it will remain as a surface. Having a knit surface allows you to combine parts like this, but also if you export your model and open them within SOLIDWORKS, they will come in as solid bodies. You can see here, because I've combined the two sub-D bodies, the apple and the toffee, I can apply features to them like this fillet, just like you can within SOLIDWORKS. This fillet was applied to smooth the transition between these two sub-D surfaces. Plus, it helps with creating a stitch link between the two fabrics of the plush. The next element I want to show you was the text element. I used xShape's sketch tab and then the text tool to create the trick or treat extrusions on the apple stick. This was so easy to do. The software is very intuitive and the tools are really easy to navigate. You may also notice that I added a fillet to the faces of the letters. This is again just for the purpose of the design. It gave my letters softened edges, which helped with the stitch effect on my rendering later on. Some other stitched elements I added to my design were the eyes. The first eye was created using a flattened globe shape, which I dragged into the model. I kept the shape unmerged and mirrored over the surface using the mirror body feature. The nose was also created using the globe, which I again flattened and reshaped. All quite simple elements to design. The sew-in label element of my design was a very quick thing to model, but it really added that realism element to the plush design when rendered, but I'll look more into this in a moment. To create this part, I used the subdivision tab's rectangle shape, which is a flat surface that can be manipulated by pulling the points and faces of the mesh to mimic a sew-in label. I could then thicken the surface as you would do in SOLIDWORKS when dealing with surfaces to create the label. I kept the label unmerged as I wanted to apply a decal to it as a whole rectangular shape. Also, the label would be sewn in like this. The sprinkles would be another stitched element to the plush toy. They were created from one cylinder shape, which was stretched and squished into these sprinkles, and then copy and pasted to place onto the treat side of the apple. You can see when I zoom into this one that the cylinder shape was dragged into the apple body to its halfway point like this. Again, these were all kept as separate bodies to make it easier for me to apply appearances to them in SOLIDWORKS. Otherwise, I would have had to select all of the mesh faces individually rather than solid bodies. Changing my view settings to remove the wire view, you get a better picture of the shapes. Sometimes I do this throughout my modelling process just to ensure everything is coming together how I want it, especially when there's more complex meshes involved. At this point, I could save and export the model out as a step file to my PC, ready to move into SOLIDWORKS. So moving into SOLIDWORKS, I've already applied all of my appearances and decals to the design. So here I have my imported step file, which has come in with all the separate knit bodies. I popped mine into separate files to make it easier to distinguish between bodies, as there were 25 in total. So I have my letters, 10 sprinkles, the face bodies, the main toffee apple, and the sew in care label. The move feature was applied just to stand the apple up as it came into SOLIDWORKS on its side. Going to my appearance tab, you can see under decals I've applied back and front decals to the label. Adding custom decals to a design like this just adds to the realism of a product. Plus, it's one of the most fun parts for me to bring a design to life almost. Looking at the back of the label, you can see here I decided to add a Made in xShape slogan, because why not? Under appearances, you can see all of the fabric appearances I've added to all the bodies. I don't have to be too picky with this, as I can go into much more detail within Visualize. I like to apply a different colour of a specific appearance to parts, so that if I want to quickly change the colour of individual components, for example the sprinkles, it's easy to do so. None of the materials or colours are final, as it's always best to see the design under the lighting and environments of the Visualize render window. To send it into Visualize, I use the Export Advanced option, as it exports my model with more detail than Export Simple. For example, all of the solid bodies will export as separate parts rather than one fixed component. This is useful if you want to have the option to move individual bodies while in Visualize or add new appearances. Opening my finished Visualize project, you can see my Trick or Treat plushie within the render window. At this point, I have everything in place. However, I've noticed that my decals have disappeared within their appearance. If this has ever happened to you after you've added an appearance to them, you can fix it by selecting the Decal under Appearances tab, and under General, uncheck and recheck the Visible and Show Decal texture boxes like this. I'm doing this for both of the label's decals, front and back. Within Visualize, I could use keyframes to create an animation, which you will see rendered at the end of the tutorial. The appearances added are all shown here. To view them closer without changing keyframes in my animation, I can select the camera icon and select the duplicated camera viewport here. The one with the red dot is the animation viewport. Zooming into the render window, you can see the fabric appearance of the plushie and the stitch effect on the eyes and nose details. Going back to my appearances tab and selecting the black appearance here, you can see the applied bump texture I used was the brush normal texture image. I increased the depth to 7 to try and make the appearance look more like embroidered thread. The toffee part of the model is also covered in a fabric bump texture. The text has the black embroidered style appearance added, while the stick has the beige cotton appearance and texture that I added from SOLIDWORKS. Within this camera viewport, the decals have lost their colours too, so I'm fixing this again. Zooming in, I'll show you how the canvas appearance and texture has applied to the sew-in label as well as the decal. So, let's see the result of this animation. I really enjoyed creating this design from start to finish. I keep finding new and exciting ways to use xShape for my design projects. I hope you found this walkthrough useful and maybe it inspires you to jump into xShape and give it a go. Thanks for watching.